Someone inside Catherine's world is talking. That much was already clear before May 2020. The whispers had been circulating in certain drawing rooms, certain dinner parties, certain corners of the Norfolk countryside where the very rich keep horses and secrets in equal measure. But on 25th May 2020, the whispers went to print. And they went to print in the one place that was supposed to be safe. Tatler, the 300-year-old Bible of the British aristocracy, the magazine Catherine reportedly keeps stacked through the royal households. The publication whose editor-in-chief had once sat beside her in art history lectures at St. Andrews, had lived 2 streets away from her, had flown to France with her in 2004 when she and William were briefly on a break. The magazine's front cover that summer showed Catherine looking immaculate, poised, powerful. The cover line reading, "Catherine the Great, How the Crisis Made Kate the Kingmaker." It looked like a coronation. It read like a betrayal. The article was written by Anna Pasternak, the author best known for her 1994 book, Princess in Love, the one about Diana's affair with James Hewitt, drawn from interviews with Hewitt himself. Pasternak drew on anonymous sources described as friends and courtiers, and what she wrote made people put the magazine down and stare at the wall for a moment. One anonymous friend was quoted directly. "Kate is furious about the larger workload. Of course she's smiling and dressing appropriately, but she doesn't want this. She feels exhausted and trapped. She's working as hard as a top CEO who has to be wheeled out all the time, without the benefits of boundaries and plenty of holidays." A top CEO wheeled out. That was the image the Friends offered of the future Queen of England. Not majestic, not stoic. Trapped. There was more. Pasternak, who acknowledged Catherine was naturally slim and a vigorous exerciser, added a line that would prove the most explosive of all. Outwardly, it seems that with years of scrutinizing public pressure, Kate has become perilously thin, just like, some point out, Princess Diana. Perilously thin, just like Diana. We'll come back to what those 4 words meant to William, because that reaction is the emotional center of everything that followed. The article attacked the Middleton family with equal relish. Carol Middleton, Catherine's mother, was characterized as a terrible snob, according to a friend of Donna Eyre, the ex-girlfriend of Catherine's brother James. The article also alleged that Prince William is obsessed with Carol. She's the mummy he always wanted, framing it as a slightly unnerving psychological dependency rather than simple affection. Pippa Middleton was compared to Hyacinth Bouquet, the social climbing sitcom character from Keeping Up Appearances. Anmer Hall, the family's Norfolk home gifted to William by the Queen on his 30th birthday, was described through the eyes of a hired craftsman as resembling a gleaming 5-star hotel with cushions plumped and candles lit. An environment Carol had allegedly imposed, stripping out any aristocratic character and replacing it with what one visitor called new money. Newsweek confirmed the piece also made reference to Carol being considered NQOCD, not quite our class, darling, in the eyes of the aristocracy, a cruelty that dated back to the fact she had been born in a council flat. Royal expert Ingrid Seward put it plainly. She manages to slag off her mother, makes William look weak, and makes Kate look so dull. And royal expert Penny Junor suggested that Pasternak had been out for revenge with the piece, a characterization Pasternak's supporters would dispute, but one that tells you something about how the article landed with people who knew the players. The context that made all of this land even harder was what had happened in the months before publication. On January 8, 2020, Harry and Meghan had announced on Instagram their intention to step back as senior members of the royal family. Within days, Sources were telling outlets that the departure immediately handed William and Catherine a substantially heavier royal schedule. 2 people were now doing the work that 4 had shared. Catherine's diary, already demanding, became relentless. The exhausted and trapped quote, whoever said it, wasn't a total fiction. It was a real emotional reality, stripped of its private context and handed to a journalist who weaponized it. Kensington Palace issued its statement on 27 May 2020, 2 days after the article went online. The wording was short, cold, and deliberate. This story contains a swath of inaccuracies and false misrepresentations, which weren't put to Kensington Palace prior to publication. That's it. No elaboration, no point-by-point rebuttal. Just a formal declaration that something was very wrong. The significance of that statement can't be overstated. The palace almost never responds to magazine stories. Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, Princess Margaret, Diana, Harry, and Meghan had all appeared in Tatler stories over the decades, without a single official comment from any royal household. The decision to issue a public denial was, in royal communications terms, the equivalent of firing a warning shot across the bow. It told every observer paying attention that something in that article had hit a nerve that the usual dignified silence simply couldn't contain. Tatler's response was defiant. A spokesperson said editor-in-chief Richard Denon stands behind the reporting of Anna Pasternak and her sources. The magazine also claimed that Kensington Palace had known about the cover months in advance and had been asked to cooperate on it, a charge the palace flatly denied. The Mail on Sunday subsequently reported that Tatler had approached Kensington Palace in February 2020 to ask whether Catherine would pose for the cover or provide an exclusive photograph. That request was politely declined. Crucially, the palace was never offered the chance to comment on the specific content of Pasternak's article before publication. That failure, that deliberate omission, is what ultimately gave the lawyers their opening. Because the lawyers came. Emily Andrews, then royal editor for the Mail on Sunday, broke the story in late May that the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were taking legal action against Tatler, sending formal legal letters demanding the profile be removed from the internet entirely. Andrews characterized the article as a string of lies. The legal letters were described at the time as a highly unusual move for the modern monarchy. Royal households generally view litigation as a last resort, something that draws more attention to the original story, not less. The fact that William and Catherine chose this path anyway tells you the gravity of what they were dealing with. Tatler's response to the legal letters was equally unyielding. At first, a Condé Nast spokesperson confirmed they had received correspondence from lawyers acting for the Duke and Duchess, and said they believed it has no merit. The standoff held through June and July. Then, quietly, in September 2020, things changed. The Telegraph reported that Tatler's online version of the piece had been edited, significantly. The exhausted and trapped passage was gone. Perilously thin, just like Princess Diana, was gone. The passage claiming William was incandescent about Megxit was gone. The Carol Middleton terrible snob section was gone. The William obsessed with Carol passage was gone. The Anmer Hall gleaming 5-star hotel description was gone. The Pippa as Hyacinth bucket comparison was gone. The turnip toffs passage, the section detailing Catherine's Norfolk social circle, was gone. In total, the magazine agreed to cut nearly a quarter of the online article. 4 months after publication, after legal letters, after a public denial unprecedented in recent palace history. A source close to Condé Nast told the Mail on Sunday, Tatler has a long-standing relationship with the royal family and wanted to end this amicably. That is the most diplomatically dressed-up statement of institutional defeat you will ever read. An insider put it more directly. This is a deeply personal victory for Catherine. She has endured her share of negative press at the hands of the media, but this was a bridge too far, and both Catherine and William were determined to shut it down. Now, let's talk about Richard Denon. Denon is Chicago-born, known in certain circles as Tricky Dicky, and has been described as a survivor, the last of the old-time Condé editors still standing in London, 7 years at the helm of Tatler by 2020. He is also the man who sat in the same art history lectures as Catherine at St. Andrews University. He lived 2 streets away from her. He went to France with her in 2004, the year she and William briefly separated. He was, by all accounts, believed to have been a guest at her 2011 wedding, and at both receptions. He knew her, not as a public figure, not as a duchess, as a person eating sandwiches in airports and flying economy, and being young and uncertain about the future. He later shared a photograph he'd taken of her doing exactly that, posting it to Instagram with the caption, "Before life got serious and we still ate wheat and flew economy." The post has since been deleted. Sources told The Sun that Catherine feels betrayed and that she was completely flummoxed by the article. She had apparently vacationed with Denon twice. A source added, "There are a lot of unanswered questions, particularly who said these things to Tatler, because her real friends would never talk that way about her." Kate remains hurt and upset, another source reported. It was very unpleasant, but she also feels betrayed, as Richard had been a friend from the St. Andrews set. Kate never saw this coming. Denon, for his part, had previously said of Catherine, "She's very measured, very controlled." And when he had first taken the editor's chair at Tatler, just days into the job, he told an interviewer, "I'm obsessed with Meghan." He is a man who understood exactly the commercial value of royal content. The question of whether the Catherine the Great article was an act of friendship that went wrong, a calculated editorial decision that was always going to hurt her, or something in between, that question has never been definitively answered. What is documented is this. Kensington Palace wasn't given the chance to respond to the article's claims before publication. The man who made that decision was someone who had eaten sandwiches with Catherine in airports. That, more than any specific quote in the article, is why the word betrayal attaches itself to this story and refuses to let go. The fallout didn't stop at the palace gate. It rippled outward into Catherine's social world, specifically the tight-knit Norfolk set the British press had taken to calling the turnip toffs. The name is exactly what it sounds like. Toff is British slang for the idle rich. Norfolk is famous for its agricultural land, and the combination produces something that sounds both ridiculous and precisely accurate. The turnip toffs are the aristocratic and upper gentry social circle that coalesced around William and Catherine after the Queen gifted William Anmer Hall, a substantial property on the Sandringham estate, on his 30th birthday. Membership in this group, as one account dryly noted, isn't easily obtained. If you have to ask how to join, you're not eligible. Most members have been friends since before they were born, a phrase that tells you everything about how class reproduces itself in rural England. The Tatler article named some of them directly before those passages were edited out. Sophie Carter and Robert Snuggs, who live near Anmer Hall, and more pointedly, Catherine's Houghton Hall neighbors, Rose Hanbury and her husband, the Marquis of Cholmondeley. The article acknowledged, delicately, that there had been a reported falling out between Catherine and Rose Hanbury the previous year, over Rose's apparent closeness to William. It noted that the whole of Norfolk was agog, and the story spilled over into the newspapers. And then, no party has commented publicly on the matter. The Tatler article knew things about this circle, specific things, the kind of things that don't make their way to a journalist through a press release. Someone talked, and given the specificity of the social detail, the descriptions of the properties, the characterizations of the personalities, the portrait of Anmer Hall from the inside, whoever talked wasn't a distant observer. They were at the table. The mole hunt that followed, as royal correspondents described it, created an atmosphere of acute paranoia inside this already closed world. A circle defined by its exclusivity and discretion had been proven to contain at least one person who was neither exclusive nor discreet. Every dinner party became a potential debrief. Every conversation carried a new weight. Nobody was named. Nobody was publicly accused. The circle simply tightened. And the question of who had spoken to Pasternak was never publicly resolved. Valentine Lowe, the Times royal correspondent and author of Courtiers, The Hidden Power Behind the Crown, has written about the profound pressure this kind of environment places on the people inside it. Throughout royal history, the monarchy has depended on a tightly controlled inner circle, courtiers, advisors, trusted friends, to navigate the space between public duty and private life. William and Catherine, Lowe observed, came to their roles equipped with what he called a very 21st century approach to press and public relations. They understood the media landscape. They tried to control it, and the Tatler episode showed the limits of that control, because you can't run a communication strategy against the people who know where you keep your personal photographs. Now we reach the part of this story that isn't, at its core, about magazines or legal letters or Norfolk dinner parties. The part that explains why William's reaction to the phrase, perilously thin, just like Princess Diana, wasn't just anger. It was something older and deeper than anger. William has spoken about this, carefully, guardedly, but he has spoken about it. In an October 2025 interview with Eugene Levy for Apple TV+, Williams said, "Growing up, I saw that with my parents. The media were so insatiable back then. They wanted every bit of detail they could absorb, and they were in everything, literally everywhere. They would know things. They'd be everywhere." He added, "If you let that creep in, the damage it can do to your family life is something that I vowed would never happen to my family. And so, I take a very strong line about where I think that line is, and those who overstep it, I'll fight against." Princess Diana died on August 31st, 1997, in a Paris underpass, her car pursued by paparazzi. William was 15. The media coverage of Diana in the years before her death, including sustained attention to her weight, her mental health, her vulnerabilities, is something he has carried his entire adult life. The phrase, perilously thin, just like Princess Diana, didn't read to William as a passing observation about his wife's frame. It read as the beginning of a pattern, a vocabulary he recognized, the first step on a road he had watched destroy someone he loved. The word incandescent had appeared in the Tatler article itself. A courtier reportedly told Pasternak that William was absolutely incandescent about Megxit. The palace would later force that passage off the internet too. But the fury it described about one betrayal was, insiders said, entirely consistent with William's fury about another. The kind of fury that produces legal letters within days, that overrides the palace's usual instinct toward dignified silence, that makes a prince willing to escalate a magazine dispute into a documented institutional conflict. It's documented in the research, confirmed by multiple sources, and entirely consistent with the picture of a man who had told himself, from the age of 15, that he would never allow the press to do to his family what they had done to his mother. His response to the Tatler article was, in that light, not disproportionate. It was the execution of a promise he had made to himself as a 15-year-old, watching his mother's life be consumed by the press. The passage comparing Catherine to Diana was ultimately scrubbed from the internet. So was the "exhausted and trapped" quote. So was the Carol Middleton characterization, the Pippa comparison, the Anmer Hall critique, and the passage about the turnip toffs. Kensington Palace's lawyers forced nearly a quarter of the article out of existence. Britain's press regulator IPSO received 6 complaints from members of the public about the piece, though not from the palace directly, and dismissed all of them. The legal path had been the right one for the Cambridges. It worked. An insider at the palace called the outcome a deeply personal victory for Catherine. But victories of this kind leave scars that public statements don't mention. Catherine knows now, in a way that is lived rather than theoretical, that the world of old friends and shared history and Norfolk weekends does not come with immunity from betrayal. The article drew on information that only people close to her could have possessed. Not everything Pasternak wrote was confirmed false. The palace statement called it inaccuracies and false misrepresentations, a construction that acknowledges the presence of at least some misrepresentation rather than total fiction. The truth was in there, blended with distortion, which is always the most effective formula for a wound that won't fully close. Richard Denon publicly defended the article and its sources. He never broke ranks against Pasternak. He watched the palace issue its denial, watched the legal letters arrive, watched nearly a quarter of his magazine's cover story disappear from the internet, and didn't offer a public apology. The magazine's final position was that it had wanted to end this amicably, which isn't the same as admitting wrongdoing. His Instagram post of Catherine at the airport, the one captioned, "Before life got serious," was quietly deleted somewhere in this period. The friendship, to the extent that it survived 2020 at all, hasn't been publicly visible since. Somewhere in this story, and nobody has officially confirmed where, is a person or persons who spoke to Anna Pasternak, or to someone who spoke to Pasternak, and provided the raw material for those deleted passages. The exhausted and trapped quote was attributed to another friend. The Carol Middleton characterization came from a friend of Donna Eyre. The William obsessed with Carol passage was attributed to an unnamed source. The craftsman who described Anmer Hall as a 5-star hotel was, by definition, someone who had been inside it. These aren't Whitehall officials or tabloid stringers. They are people who know the family, who were let in. Valentine Lowe has written about how the monarchy depends on the silence of its inner circle, how an institution that can't fully be transparent must trust absolutely the people it admits to proximity. That trust is the price of access, and it runs both ways. When it breaks everything. Not just the friendship, the entire architecture of privacy that royal life is built on. Catherine survived the Tatler storm. William fought for it with legal firepower the palace almost never deploys. The most damaging passages were scrubbed, the institutional conflict resolved, on the palace's terms, eventually, quietly, 4 months later. But the mole was never publicly named. The legal letters named the magazine, not the sources. The investigation, to the extent there was one, concluded without a public verdict. The circle closed around whoever had spoken, or whoever had passed the information along, or whoever had decided that their relationship with a journalist mattered more than their relationship with Catherine. Somewhere in a Norfolk drawing room, at a dinner table Catherine has perhaps sat at herself, someone knows exactly what they said and to whom. They have watched the legal process play out. They watch the passages disappear. They know the deeply personal victory the palace claimed was, in part, a victory over information they provided. And they have said nothing, publicly. William knows there is a name. Catherine knows there is a name. The name hasn't been given. That is the part no lawyer could fix. That is the part that doesn't go away when the article gets edited and the legal correspondence is filed. The question of which of your friends is actually your friend is one that Catherine, by the summer of 2020, could no longer answer with certainty about everyone she thought she knew. That is the specific cruelty of betrayal at this level. Not just what was said, but the permanent recalibration of trust that follows. Every friendship carries a small new weight, every dinner conversation measured, every intimate detail, guarded just a little more carefully than before. The price of being Catherine isn't just the workload, not just the scrutiny, not just the loss of an ordinary life. It's that the people close enough to know the truth are sometimes also the people who give it away. And you can go to law against the magazine. You can't go to law against the loneliness that leaves behind. Subscribe for more stories like this one.